In our studies on the primeval light, we noted that God made the universe with the yot and the he. In fact, Monk puts it this way: God created the universe with the letters yot and he, which formed the divine name Yah. With the letter yot, he created the world to come, while with the he created this world. Now, we've talked about the he on previous programs. On today's program, we're going to talk about this metaphysical letter, the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the smallest of all the letters, the yot. Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me this strange metaphysical letter.
It's called the letter of spirituality, or the metaphysical. I have here a book on the Hebrew letters, and I'm pointing at the letter yot, which can be pronounced either yot or yut, depending upon your tradition. Actually, most Jews today, JR, pronounce it yut, but for some reason you and I have adopted the first pronunciation, which is yot. The smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet, but if you examine the alphabet, the yot is at the top of each and every letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
So it's a part of every letter.
Yes, it
All
is. 22
letters have the yot. Jesus said in Matthew 5:18, "For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, not one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled." The jot he was talking about is this letter yot, the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
The jot. Now, the interesting thing about this jot, and I'm going to, pardon me while I shift some books here, I have quite a few books, is that as J.R. read a moment ago, the Jews imbue these letters with creative power and energy, which is a strange idea to Gentile ears. And yet, this idea of combining the yot and the he to form the letter Yah, or the word Yah, is foundational to Jewish thinking.
It's the name of God.
It's the name of God. Now, the letter yot also, if you just change the vowel pointers, becomes the word yat, which is the Hebrew word for hand. And so the yot cum yat symbolizes the hand of God in creation, or in some cases, the hand of a man moved by God, as was Moses, for example. And so the hand as a creative, if you will, tool or idea is very central to the idea of the yot.
You know, this hand is most fascinating. The he represents the Spirit of God, and the yot represents the hand of God. So with the hand of God and the Spirit of God, he made all things. Now with the Spirit of God, he made this world. With the hand of God, he made the world to come. That's a metaphysical statement, because we have never seen the world to come. Human eyes cannot detect it. Human instruments cannot decipher or detect such a thing. And yet, I guess we'd have to say, Gary, it's over there. It's in another dimension. It's here, but we can't see it, we can't feel it, we can't taste it, we can't touch it. The hand of God. And God removed his hand from this earth. People ask the question, why wars, why poverty, why hunger? The hand of God has been removed from human affairs. The Spirit of God continues to work, and sometimes the hand of God is seen in the affairs of this world. For example, Ezekiel chapter 37, Ezekiel said, "The hand of the Lord was upon me. He picked me up and put me in a valley full of dry bones," and said, "See here the revival of the house of Israel."
Absolutely.
So we see the hand of God in the Jew going back to his land in this generation.
The hand of God. Many of us have read the writings of Alfred Edersheim, and he was a brilliant Hebrew Christian from the last century who wrote, among other things, The Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. And he wrote, and I quote, "Jewish tradition mentions this very letter yot as irremovable." And he's speaking here of the occasion upon which Jesus spoke to the Pharisees and told them that not one yot or one tittle could be removed until all things were fulfilled. And so Edersheim writes, Jewish tradition mentions this very letter yot as irremovable, adding that if all men in the world were gathered together to abolish the least letter in the law, they would not succeed. And I think that's more than a figure. Also, we have this. Similarly, the guilt of changing those little hooks called tittles, which make the distinction between such Hebrew letters as a dalet and a resh, which just the only difference is a little point. And a hey and a chet, the only difference is a tiny addition of a line. A beit and a kaf, again, just a tiny little point on one corner makes a difference, is declared to be so great that if such were done, the world would be destroyed. That's quite a mouthful.
Incredible.
Which means that the Jews literally believed, J.R., that the Hebrew letters were more than symbols.
Yes.
They were absolutely tools in the hand of God that hold everything together.
That were used in creation and then that continue to hold creation together. In fact, the rabbis have written that if one letter were removed from the Torah, the universe would, fall apart, cease to exist?
Cease to exist. Again, and pardon me while I shift through various books, I have a number of quotes to read today, and I hope I can find them quickly. Here's an example of what you'll find in Jewish writings. Quote, if the letters of the 10 utterances by which the earth was created during the 6 days of creation were to depart from it, even for an instant, God forbid, it would revert to naught and absolute nothingness, exactly as before the 6 days of creation. This is a statement from Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, 1745 through 1812. It's an ancient idea, and it was ancient even when this man made that statement, that these letters hold creation together. And J.R.,
we have that same statement made of Christ, don't we?
We
Where He
do.
is the Word embodied.
He is the Word, and the opening of the Epistle to the Hebrews talks about how God in these last days has spoken to us by His Son, Hebrews verse 2 of chapter 1, whom He hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also He made the worlds, who, being the express brightness of His glory and the express image of His person, and upholding all things by the word of His power, there it is, when He had by Himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the Majesty on high. J.R., this is in our Bible.
He took His position at the Yot.
Took His position
the right hand of God.
At the right hand of Yot.
Hallelujah.
Amen. And you know, He's upholding all things. This is in the present tense in the Greek, which means it implies a continual action here. He is currently upholding all things by the what? By the word of His power. And that would be Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. It would be Yot by His own hand. It would, all of the letters
have a Yot in it.
Each and every one of those letters has the Yot or the Yat, the hand of God, in it.
At the end, at the very end of the 66 books of the Bible, in the last verses of the book of Revelation, chapter 22 and verse 18, He says, for I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book. And I think He's referring not just to Revelation, but to the entire Bible from Genesis forward. If any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part in the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which are written in this book. Same concept taught by the rabbis, that God used the alphabet as instruments of power and creative power in creating this world, and that if one letter were removed, then it would all crumble, it would all fall apart, cease to exist.
And again, I have to say, if all this sounds strange to your ears, it's because your ears are not tuned to thinking of the metaphysical, which is the idea behind the Yot. The metaphysical meaning beyond the physical. Meta means beyond.
Yes.
And we're talking about things beyond the veil here, J.R. The veil conceals these things, and yet they're very active and very central to biblical thinking.
Now, Gary, one reason why people who are listening may not quite understand yet what we're talking about is we read from the King James Version of the Bible, an English translation. Let's go back to the original Hebrew, when God gave the Torah, that is the 5 books of Moses, to Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. He dictated these to Moses, say the rabbi, letter for letter, not word for word, but letter for letter.
That's correct.
Meaning that God has written in the 5 books from Genesis through Deuteronomy a complete work of the mind and thoughts of God.
Yes.
Which leads us, I guess, to this idea of the Bible codes.
Well, you know, and we're coming to the end of our time for this segment, but the Bible codes depend on this letter for letter idea. When we come back, we'll get into depth and detail on this.
The Bible codes is a fascinating study developed by rabbis in Israel. In order to find these codes, these words and phrases encoded in the scriptures of the first 5 books of Moses, all the letters have to be there, don't they, Gary?
They have to be there, and they have to be there in perfection. When it comes to transmissibility, that is, maintaining the textual perfection of a book down through the ages, the Hebrew text is absolutely unmatched. It's near 100%, if not 100%, in transmissibility. That means that the text of the Torah that we have, excuse me, today is virtually identical with the one we have that came from the time of David.
The letters of the Hebrew text have to be perfect in order to find Bible codes. For if one letter were removed or another letter added, it would throw off the sequence, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. You couldn't have Bible coding, which, by the way, has been statistically demonstrated to be a real artifact. It's not somebody's imagination.
Right. So in the last verses of the Bible, when the Bible says, if any man adds to or takes away from the words of this prophecy, God will do thus and so to him, there's a purpose for saying that. The integrity of the Scriptures has to be maintained.
And only the Jews have this idea. I think it's very interesting to remember this, because what would motivate one to perfectly copy a text over thousands of years? And here is the admonition given to Jewish scribes. And I'm quoting from a book on Bible coding. To this very day, every Torah scroll of the kind that may be found in any synagogue the world over is copied by hand from its predecessor, written out according to unchanging rules by scribes who undergo an exacting course of training and preparation. To each of them, the following warning has been passed down through the ages. We should hear it as more than a poetic metaphor. And here's the warning. Quote, should you perchance omit or add one single letter from the Torah, you would thereby destroy all the universe, end quote. This is why the scribes keep things so perfect.
That sounds just like John writing Revelation chapter 22, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah, it really does.
And also the writer of Hebrews saying he upholds all things by the word of his power. Yeah. Same concept. And this yoke, Jesus said, not one yoke, not one tittle would pass away. There is a yod in every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. There is a tittle in every letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the forming of the letters.
That's right.
Fascinating. Small, insignificant, seemingly, but so absolutely profoundly significant that if one was removed, the universe would collapse.
And you know, we find this in Isaiah, for example. The prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 26:4. You might read that from the King James Version. It's very familiar.
Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength.
Okay, now that last phrase, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength, in the Hebrew says, Ki be'yah, Yahweh, Tzor, Olamim. And what that says is, for with his name, Yah, Yot-He, the Lord is the rock of the universe. That's what that that's what it literally says. The foundation stone, and the foundation stone is his name, the Yot-He. That's the rock upon which the universe stands. J.R., I'm beginning to get chills. I don't know about you.
When Moses wrote in the Song of Moses that he is our rock.
Yeah.
And the psalmist referred to God as our rock. he's talking about this very same thing.
It's
the yoke and the hay.
We tend to think of it as poetic, but it's not. It's the truth. It's the absolute truth. He's the stone upon which all other things are built. We have that, of course, in 1 Corinthians, the idea that no other foundation can be laid. And that foundation, as the Jews say, was laid with 10 divine utterances. In Genesis chapter 1, you know, the numerical value of the yot in Hebrew is 10.
Yes. In our book, The Mystery of the Menorah and the Hebrew Alphabet, we have discussed the yot, the various letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and here we have written the idea of conclusion parallels with the fact that the yot represents the number 10. The rabbis teach that the number 10 should be viewed as a unit. For example, it took 10 generations from Adam to Noah to complete the breakdown of morality to such an extent that mankind, except for Noah and his family, had to be destroyed. They also say with 10 utterances, God created the worlds. These correspond to the 10 commandments, the 10 plagues that freed Israel from Egypt, etc. Also in Hebrew, both the name of God and the name of Israel began with yot. And on it goes. The number 10 is most significant here.
It really is. You know, just quickly, think about this. Our letter J is the letter that's used to translate the yot. And you have Jehovah begins with a yot. Jesus begins with a yot. Jacob begins with a yot. Joseph. Jerusalem. Israel. Yisrael begins with a yot. Yeshurun, which is the diminutive.
Also called Jeshurun.
Yeshurun.
In places there's the J.
The J.
On it,
Yeshurun is God's diminutive in term of endearment for Israel. And then Judah, the Messianic tribe, begins with a yot. How is it that all important things in the Bible seem to begin with the letter yot?
Wow. Well, you know, the yot is metaphysical. It is not of this world. It refers to the kingdom of heaven, the other side. God withdrew the primeval light from the planet and from this universe after creating the sun, the moon, and the stars on the 4th day. For the first 3 days of creation, he had this primeval light, and then he withdrew it like the yot as metaphysical. It's not of this world. When Pilate said, "Are you a king then?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." He was talking about the kingdom at the right hand of God. The yot is very important in all of this as we understand the Hebrew language and the use of it.
The 10 divine utterances very much reflect the yot. God said, "Let there be light," number 1. Number 2, "Let there be firmament." Number 3, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together." Number 4, "Let the earth bring forth grass." Number 5, "Let there be lights in the firmament." Number 6, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly." Number 7, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters." Number 8, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind." Number 9, "Let us make man in our own image." Number 10, "Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth." And those 10 utterances, why 10? Why 10 commandments, J.R.? Why not 11 or 12 or 9 commandments?
Yes, well, you know, the Jews say that before the 6 days or 7 days of creation, the 7th day in which God rested, there were 3 primeval days of creation. I guess that's when God used the yot to create the world to come. We don't know anything about that other than what the rabbis have suggested, but we do know that from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, there are 10 days of penitence. The days of awe are 10 in number. And so this number 10 and the yot, the hand of God, is most important. We see with the yot a metaphysical, the hand of God. When the rabbis say that the Vav, representing the Messiah, when the exile of the Jews came, they were scattered to the nations, then the Vav removed from the hay and went to live with the yot. And one day the Vav will return from the yot back to the hay. Well, that's Christ going to heaven to sit down at the right hand of God the Father, the yoke, the right hand of God, one day. And by the way, he said to the disciples, if I don't go away, I can't send the Holy Spirit, the Comforter.
Right.
So he went to the yoke so that he could send the hay, and the hay is here.
The Holy
Until
Spirit.
until that day when Jesus returns.
Wow. You know, the yot is also said to stand for humility. Since it's the tiniest letter of the entire Hebrew alphabet, it stands for humility. Jesus was the picture of humility, and he encouraged all of us to be humble.
The yoke and the hay, and it'll never, never go away.